evening, and welcome to the senior speech recital of Mr. Elisha Rose. Mr. Rose's recital was prepared under the direction of Mr. Daniel Webb and is in partial fulfillment for the requirements for a Bachelor of Arts degree in Performance Studies. Immediately following tonight's performance, Mr. Rose would be delighted to greet his guests out in the main lobby. However, at this time, would you please stand with me and join me as I pray. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for your grace and your goodness to us. Father, I thank you so much, especially tonight, for Elisha and the many talents that you have given him. Lord, I thank you also that he has chosen to use those talents for your honor and glory. I ask to be with him tonight during the performance, and Lord, may everything that we do as well redound to your honor and glory. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.
Can you oblige me, sir? My name is Ratchet, and I believe I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Hercules Poirot. Is that so? Monsieur Hercule Poirot had already taken note of Monsieur Ratchet, especially how he looked down at him with false benevolence and cruel eyes. Poirot raised his eyebrows a trifle as he adjusted his prized mustaches. You have been correctly informed, monsieur. In my country, we come to the point quickly. Mr. Poirot, I want you to take on a job for me. The Orient Express had started on its 3-day journey across Europe only yesterday. Poirot sat in the luncheon car, observing all the other passengers as the train rode on. All around him were people, of all classes, of all nationalities, of all ages. He turned his attention back to the wild, animal-like face in front of him. My clientele, monsieur, is limited nowadays. I undertake very few cases. Why, yes, I understand that. But this, Mr. Poirot, means big money. Big money. And what is it you wish for me to do for you, Monsieur Ratchet? Monsieur Poirot, I'm a rich man, a very rich man. People in that position have enemies. I have an enemy. Only one enemy? Just what do you mean by that question? Monsieur, in my experience, when one is in a position to have, as you say, enemies, then it does not usually resolve itself into one enemy only. Oh, why, yes, I appreciate that point. Enemy or enemies, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is my safety. Safety. My life has been threatened, Mr. Poirot. Now, I'm the kind of man who can take pretty good care of himself. I don't fancy I'll be caught napping, but the more I think of it, the more I feel I should make assurance doubly sure. I fancy you're the man for my money, Mr. Poirot. And remember, big money. Poirot looked at him thoughtfully for some minutes. His face was completely expressionless. The other could have had no clue as to what thoughts were occurring in that mind. I regret, monsieur, that I cannot oblige you. Name your figure, then? You do not understand, monsieur. I have been very fortunate in my profession. I have made enough money to satisfy my needs and my caprices. I only take such cases now as interest me. Well, you've got some nerve. Will $20,000 tempt you? It will not. If you're holding out for more, you won't get it. I know what a thing's worth to me. I also, Monsieur Ratchet. Just what's wrong with my proposition? If you will forgive me for being personal, I do not like your face. And with that, he walked out of the restaurant car. The next morning, Poirot was visited by one of the wagonette attendants and told that his presence was requested by Monsieur Webb, the director of the Company Internationale, a fellow Belgian and a friend. Poirot followed his guide to the compartment of Monsieur Webb himself. Oh, my good friend, come in. We have need of you. What has occurred? You may as well ask what has not occurred. First, we are stuck in a snowdrift. Heaven knows how long we shall be here. And now, And now, what? And now, a passenger lies dead in his berth, stabbed. A passenger? Which passenger? An American. His name's, Ratchet. It was serious. Well, certainly it is serious. Dr. Constantine here is of the opinion that death occurred at about 1 a.m.
Oh, it is difficult to speak exactly in these matters, but I believe I can say definitely that death occurred sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning.
Yes. Pierre Michel here was the one who discovered him.
Well, we broke open the door and... Oh, la terrible!
The door was locked and bolted from the inside. It was not suicide, eh?
Does a man who commits suicide stab himself in 10, 12, 15 places?
That is great ferocity.
I can assure you that 1 or 2 of the blows were delivered with enough force to drive them through hard belts of bone and muscle. The blows seem to have been delivered haphazard and at random. It is as though someone had shut his eyes and then in a frenzy stabbed blindly again and again and again.
I have something to contribute to your store of knowledge. Yesterday, Ratchet approached me and said he was in danger of his life. The question is, what are we to do? Come, my friend, you comprehend what I am about to ask of you. Take command of this investigation. By the time the Yugoslavian police arrive, how simple it would be if we could just present them with a solution. Use, as I have often heard you say, the little gray cells, and you will know. I was comprehending that many hours of boredom lay ahead whilst we are stuck here. And now a problem lies ready in my hands. To begin with, I should like to have all the passengers' passports and their tickets. I would also like Monsieur le Docteur to accompany me to the dead man's carriage. Followed closely by Dr. Constantine, Poirot made his way to the compartment of the dead man. The 2 men stepped inside and looked at the motionless figure lying on his back. It was not pretty. How many wounds are there exactly?
I make it 12. 1 or 2 are so slight to be practically scratches, yet at least 3 would be capable of causing death. Well, this is all. You see these wounds here and here? Those blows must have severed blood vessels, and yet the edges have not bled. It would suggest that the man was already dead when those blows were delivered. But surely that is absurd.
Manifestly absurd. Anything else?
Just one. You see this wound right here? That blow was most definitely delivered with the left hand. But as you can see, some of these other blows are just as obviously right-handed.
2 murderers. Bien, we have here a hypothesis. The first murderer enters the car, stabs his victim, then leaves, shutting off the light. The second murderer enters the car, does not see that his job has already been done, and stabs at least twice at an already dead body.
Ah, magnifico!
Do you think so? It sounded to me like nonsense. Have we here a coincidence or what? And the victim, what does he do in all this? Does he cry out? Does he struggle? Does he defend himself? Yes. Fully loaded, you see?
Oh, look here on the table. Oh, here's the explanation of his inertia. This water has been drawn.
Look at this. A small square piece of cambric. Very dainty. With an embroidered H in the corner.
Oh, there is a woman concerned in this.
Look at this. A pipe cleaner.
Well, it is probably the property of Monsieur Ratchet.
There is no pipe on his person. Decidedly a clue. And, like the handkerchief, dropped most conveniently. One cannot complain of having no clues in this case.
You will pardon me, Monsieur Poirot, but I do not quite understand you.
I do not understand myself.
I understand nothing, and as you perceive, it bothers me. What is that? A charred piece of paper and a match.
Possibly a note. Poirot carefully unfolded the scrap piece of charred paper, revealing the remnants of 3 words. Little Daisy Armstrong. Ah!
It tells you something?
Yes. I know the dead man's real name. Cassetti.
Oh, Cassetti! He brings to me something as well. Oh, it was a case in America, was it not?
Yes, a case in America. Bien, there is nothing more here, I think. Let us return to Monsieur Bock. I have identified the dead man's real name. Who was he? Do you remember reading of the Armstrong baby? Colonel Armstrong was an Englishman, a VC, who married the daughter of Linda Arden, the most famous tragic American actress of her day. They lived in New York and had a child, a girl whom they idolized. When the child was 3 years old, she was kidnapped. After the parents paid over a sum of $200,000, the child's dead body was discovered. Public indignation rose to a fever point, and there was worse to follow. Mrs. Armstrong had been expecting another baby. Upon the shock of the discovery, she gave birth prematurely to a dead child, and she herself died. Her broken-hearted husband shot himself. Oh, what a tragedy! I remember now. There was another death, if I remember rightly. Yes, an unfortunate French nursemaid. The police were convinced that she had some knowledge of the crime and refused to believe her hysterical denials. Finally, in a fit of despair, the poor girl threw herself out the window and was killed. It was later proven that she was completely innocent of any complicity in the crime. About 6 months later, this man Cassetti was arrested as the head of the gang responsible for the kidnapping. But, owing to an enormous amount of wealth he had accumulated and a certain hold he had over various persons, he was acquitted under a technical inaccuracy. He would have been lynched by the populace had he not given them the slip. He has obviously changed his name and has traveled abroad as a gentleman of leisure, living off of his rendezvous.
Oh, quel animal! I cannot regret that he is dead. Not at all.
I agree. If I am right in my assumption, then this note was burnt by the murderer. Why? Because it mentions the name Armstrong, which is decidedly a clue to the case. The 3 men made their way to the restaurant bar and sat down at one of the tables. In front of Poirot were all the passengers' passports and their tickets. Excellent. We can open our court of inquiry without further ado. Let us first take the evidence of the wagon-lit attendant. Pierre Michel had arrived and recovered some of his assurance, but was still extremely nervous. Poirot asked him questions of last night and confirmed that Ratchet had retired to bed before the train had left Belgrade. Suppose that an assassin had joined the train. Is it possible for him to have left the train after committing the crime?
Oh, no one could have gotten onto the sleeping car without my seeing them.
Thank you, monsieur. That will be all. Let us now hear from Monsieur Ratchet's secretary, Monsieur McQueen. The young American arrived in the dining car. Have you found out who got him? You are assuming Monsieur Ratchet was murdered? Well, wasn't he? You mean to tell me he just died in his sleep? That old man, he was as tough as... Forgive me, but who exactly are you? I am a detective. My name is Hercule Poirot. I have identified Monsieur Ratchet's real name. He was Cassetti, responsible for the celebrated kidnapping of Daisy Armstrong.
That skunk.
If I had known, I'd have cut off my right hand before doing secretarial work for him. You speak strongly of the case, monsieur. My father, he was the district attorney who handled the case, Monsieur Poirot. If there was a man who deserved what he got, Cassetti was the man. The task before me is to make sure of all the passengers' movements last night. Can you tell me your movements from the dining car onwards? Well, I went to my compartment, I read a bit. I talked a good deal with Colonel Arbuthnot. We actually went out on the platform at Belgrade, but it was too cold. We didn't stay long. Then I returned to my compartment, had my bed made up, and I slept till morning. Do you smoke a pipe, monsieur? Well, no, I don't. Thank you, that will be all. Let us now hear from Monsieur Ratchet's valet. The young American was succeeded by the long-faced, paled Englishman, Henry Edward Masterman. He explained that he last saw his master alive at about 9 o'clock when he went to his compartment to see to his wants. Was his manner the same as usual?
Well, sir, he seemed a little upset over a letter he'd been reading. He lost his temper very easily.
A letter. And does your master usually take a sleeping draught?
Always when traveling by train, sir. I poured it into a glass for him, then left it on the table. Then I returned to my own compartment and read, until the Italian whom I share the compartment with desired to go to bed.
Do you smoke a pipe, monsieur?
No, sir, I do not.
Thank you, that will be all.
If you will pardon me, sir, there's an elderly American woman, a Mrs. Hubbard by name. She's in what I might describe as an excitable state, sir. She says she knows all about the murder.
Mrs. Hubbard? Ah. In that case, we will see her next. Mrs. Hubbard arrived in the dining car in such a state of breathless excitement, she was hardly able to articulate her words. Now, just tell me this. Who's in authority here? I got some very important information. Very important indeed. And I'm going to tell it to someone in authority just as soon as I can. Tell it to me, madam. Oh, well, what I got to say is just this. The murderer was right there, in my compartment. I'll tell you everything. I went to bed, I'd gone to sleep, and then I woke up, and I knew there was a man in my compartment. Oh, I was just so scared. I remember thinking, mercy, I'm gonna be killed. I got my wits about me, though, and pressed the button for the conductor. Oh, the relief when someone knocked on the door. Come in, I screamed, and turned on the light. And would you believe it, there wasn't a soul there. And what happened next, madam? Well, I told the conductor what had happened, and he didn't seem to believe me. I'm not one to imagine things. And what's more, I got proof. You see this button? It's not off of anything I got. I found it this morning when I woke up.
But this is the button from a tunic of a wagon-lit attendant.
It was on top of a magazine on the case beneath the window. The conductor last night never went near the window. What do you call that, I should like to know? That, madam, I call evidence. Now, one last question. Do you remember the case of the Armstrong kidnapping? Oh, yes, indeed I do. And how the wretch that did it escaped scot-free. He has not escaped, madam. He died last night. Ratchet was the man. You don't mean? Well, to think of that, I must write and tell my daughter. I said just last night, that man had an evil face. I was right, you see. My daughter, she always says, when Mama's got a hunch, you can bet your bottom dollar it's okay. Well, madam, you have helped us very much indeed. Oh, madam, you dropped your handkerchief. Well, that's not my handkerchief, Monsieur Poirot. I got mine right here. Pardon. I just noticed it had the initial H on it. Oh, well, now, that's funny, but it's certainly not one of mine. Mine are sensible things, not expensive paraphilas. What good is a handkerchief like that to anyone's nose?
None of the three gentlemen seem to have an answer to this question. And Mrs. Hubbard sailed out triumphantly.
This button, it suggests possibilities. Let us now interview the Swedish lady.
The lady with the long, mild, sheep-like face was ushered in. Her name was Greta Olsen, and she was a trained matron nurse from the missionary school in Istanbul. She explained how she had retired to bed but had a headache, so she borrowed some aspirin from Mrs. Hubbard. And then she returned to her compartment. Do you share your compartment with someone? Yes, a young English lady, Mary Debenham. Very nice, very amiable. She's a governess. And did she leave the compartment at all during the night? Oh, I am sure she did not. I sleep very lightly. I'm used to waking at the sound. Thank you, madam, that will be all. Let us see if Madame La Princess can spare us a few moments of her time.
Is she the one with the yellow toad-like face?
Yes, the one who is as ugly as sin. The Russian Princess Dragomirov arrived in the dining car. She was very cooperative, explaining how she had retired to bed but could not sleep. She rang for her maid, Hildegard Schmidt. The maid massaged her and read aloud to her until she fell asleep about 30 minutes later. You have been in America before, I presume, Madame la Princess. Were you ever acquainted with a family by the last name of Armstrong, a family in which a great tragedy had occurred?
You speak of good friends of mine, monsieur. I was on terms of personal friendship with Sonia Armstrong's mother, the actress Linda Auden. She was a great genius. As Lady Macbeth, as Magda, there was no one to touch her.
And there was a second daughter, if I remember rightly.
Yes, much younger than Mrs. Armstrong herself, Helena Goldenberg. I believe she married an Englishman and moved to London some time ago, but at the moment I do not recollect his name.
I will trouble you no further, mademoiselle. I am much obliged to you for answering my questions so promptly. The Russian princess rose and left. Poirot looked over the passports and noticed that of the Count and Countess Andreni from the Hungarian embassy. He took a special notice of a grease mark that had been dropped on the Countess's name on her passport. They were summoned. Poirot began to explain who Cassetti really was, and then started his questions. I only wish to ask if you saw or heard anything last night that may shed some light on the situation.
I'm afraid I saw and heard nothing, monsieur. I had taken a sleeping draught last night.
And you, monsieur, do you smoke a pipe?
No, sir, I do not.
I will trouble you no further.
What? Well, that did not advance us much.
No, to people who saw nothing and heard nothing.
This grease mark.
Let us now interview the good-looking Colonel Arbuthnot. Colonel Arbuthnot arrived in the car. He confirmed everything explained to them by Monsieur McQueen. Then Poirot began his questions. Do you smoke, monsieur? A cigarette? A pipe?
A pipe?
And were you ever acquainted with a Colonel Armstrong, whose only child was kidnapped and killed? The man who died last night was responsible for the kidnapping.
Well, then, in my opinion, the swine deserved what he got. Though I would have preferred to see him properly hanged, or electrocuted, I suppose. Say what you like. Trial by jury is a sound system.
Yes, I assume that would be appropriate for you. Thank you, monsieur. That will be all. He is the only one so far who admits to smoking a pipe. Let us now interview the last American on the coach. The flamboyant American, Mr. Hardman, arrived in the car. He said he saw and heard nothing last night, but felt that he should have. When Poirot asked him to explain, he produced a different passport. You are a detective for the McNeil Detective Agency in New York.
That's right. Came over to Europe trailing a couple of crooks. The chase ended in Istanbul. I would have been making my way back to little old New York, but the dead man asked to hire me.
Monsieur Ratchet?
Yes, he put a proposition to me. I was to travel by the same train as he did and make sure that no one got him. Well, gentlemen, I did travel by the same train, but despite me, someone did get him. It doesn't look any too good for me.
You have no idea, I suppose, of the possible assailant?
Well, Mr. Ratchet described him as a small man, dark, with a woman-like voice. He said the fellow was out for his blood and meant to get it.
And how did you carry out his proposition?
I stayed asleep all night. I slept during the morning. And then I stayed on watch all night. I saw nothing the past 2 nights.
You are sure of that?
Plumb certain. I'll take my oath on it.
And do you smoke a pipe?
Well, not me.
Thank you, monsieur. That will be all. Well, he has given us a very interesting piece of evidence. A small man, dark, with a high-pitched voice. A description which applies to no one on the train. And now, let us interview the Italian man. The Italian man entered the dining car. Your name is Antonio Fascarelli, and I see you are a naturalized American subject.
Yes! I'm an agent for Ford Motor Cars. I do big business. I am up to date.
Do you remember encountering a family by the last name of Armstrong?
Oh! No, it is difficult to say. Let me give you some figures. Last year alone, I saw...
Monsieur, pray confine yourself to the point. Now, can you tell me your movements from the dining car onwards last night?
Oh, 1,000 pardons. I stay here as long as I can. It is more amusing. Then I go to my compartment. It is empty. The miserable valet I share it with, he's away attending to his master. Oh, at last he comes back. A very long face as usual. He doesn't talk. He just says yes and no. All a miserable race, the English. Not so pathetic. He just stays in the corner and reads very stiff. Then the conductor comes. He makes our beds.
Monsieur, do you smoke a pipe?
Oh, no, sir. I prefer to...
Thank you, monsieur. That will be all. Information gushes out of that man. Let us now interview Miss Mary Debenham. Miss Mary Debenham arrived in the car and sat down opposite Poirot and Monsieur Bonk. Your name is Mary Hermione Debenham, and I see you are 26 years of age. Yes. Can you tell me the affair of last night? Well, I'm afraid I have nothing to tell you. I went to bed and gone to sleep. Does it distress you, mademoiselle, that a crime has been committed on this train? Well, I haven't really thought of it from that point of view. No, I can't say that I'm at all distressed. Do you know who Ratchet really was, mademoiselle? Mrs. Hubbard has been telling everyone. The whole Armstrong affair is quite abominable. I will trouble you no further, mademoiselle. Miss Debenham seemed a little taken aback, but she rose and left. To the final name on our list, Hildegard Schmidt, lady's maid. Miss Hildegard Schmidt arrived. She confirmed everything told to them by the Russian princess. Then Poirot began his questions. Is this your handkerchief, Fräulein Schmidt?
No, that is not my handkerchief.
Pardon. And after you left Madame la Princess, did you see anyone else in the corridor?
Well, there was no one else in the corridor. Wait, except for the conductor. He nearly ran into me. He apologized and continued towards the dining car. I had never seen this conductor before. He was small, dark, and his voice was weak like a woman's.
Weak like a woman's. Thank you, Fräulein Schmidt. That will be all. This small man with the high-pitched voice could very easily be the man who left this button in Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. There is now stronger evidence to her story. We should...
The compartment door burst open, and in ran Mrs. Hubbard.
Oh! It's just so horrible! It's just so horrible! In my sponge bag! My sponge bag! A great knife! All covered in blood! Oh!
Monsieur Poirot and Monsieur Webb, followed closely by Dr. Constantine, made their way to the compartment of Mrs. Hubbard, which was right next door to Monsieur Ratchet's compartment. They stepped inside, and on the floor beneath a sponge bag hanging on the handle of the communication door was a long, straight-bladed dagger. It was covered with patches of what looked like rust. Yes, here is our missing weapon, all right. Hey, Doctor?
Oh, that is the weapon, all right. It would account for any of the wounds.
I pray, my friend, do not say that. Already we are heavily overburdened by coincidence. 2 people decided to murder Monsieur Ratchet last night. It is too much of a good thing that they should both select the same weapon.
As for that, the coincidence is probably not as great as it seems. Thousands of these sham Eastern daggers are made and shipped to the bazaars of Constantinople.
You console me a little, but only a little.
Well, it agrees, does it not? The murderer comes through the communication door, shoves the knife into the sponge bag, and leaves.
As you say, that must be how it happened. But there is something that does not satisfy me. The same point does not strike you? No, evidently not. Well, it is a small matter.
Monsieur Poirot, the American lady is coming back.
I'm going to say one thing right now. I'm not going any farther in this compartment. Why, I wouldn't stay in here tonight if you paid me $1 million. I just can't tell you how horrible it was. I've always been very weak at the sight of blood. Ever since I was a child. Why, just now, I get faint thinking about it. But, madam, I know what you're going to say. And I'm telling you right now, I'd rather stay up all night in the corridor. Oh, if only my daughter could see me now. Why?
No, madam. Your request is most reasonable. Your baggage shall be moved from this compartment altogether. You shall have a compartment on the next coach.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I do feel better already. I'm not an extra nervous woman, but to sleep next door to a dead man, it would drive me plumb crazy.
But first, madam, a little matter of routine. You permit that I make a search of your baggage?
Well, what on earth for?
We are about to commence a search of all the passengers' luggage. I do not wish to remind you of an unpleasant experience.
Oh, mercy. Perhaps you're better. Oh, I just couldn't bear to have another surprise of that kind. Go ahead.
Mrs. Hubbard was traveling with the most meager of luggage, and the search would not have taken longer than necessary had Mrs. Hubbard not delayed matters by insisting on due attention paid to photographs of
my daughter
and of 2 rather ugly children.
My daughter's children, I think, I mean.
Having delivered himself of various polite insincerities, Poirot then excused himself into the corridor, followed closely by his 2 friends. It would be best, I assume, just to proceed down the corridor, carriage by carriage. Many of the bags they searched yielded no results. However, when they searched the suitcase belonging to Colonel Arbuthnot, Poirot noticed that there was a package of pipe cleaners that corresponded exactly with the ones in Monsieur Ratchet's compartment. When they searched the suitcase of Hildegard Schmidt, Poirot undid the hasp and lifted the lid. And there, on top, was a hastily rolled-up brown wagon-lit uniform.
Oh! That is not mine. I've never seen that before. I haven't checked that case since we left Istanbul. Indeed, it is true.
No. See, I will tell you how this happened. This man you saw last night, the conductor, he runs into you. That is bad luck for him. He was hoping no one would see him. What is he to do? He must get rid of his uniform. He proceeds down the corridor until he finds your empty compartment, removes the uniform, then shoves it into the suitcase. And then, that we will discuss. Look here. Yes, the 3rd button down is missing. And a conductor's passkey. This is how one man was able to pass through locked doors. The remaining luggage they searched yielded no results. Poirot then said, "We will go to the dining car. We know all there is to know. We have the evidence of the passengers, the evidence of their baggage, the evidence of our eyes.
We can expect no further help. It is our job now to use our brains. Well, if you solve this case, mon cher, I shall indeed believe in miracles. I can't make heads or tails of it.
I agree. To be quite frank, I have no idea what you're going to do next.
No, that, to me, is the interest of this case. We are cut off from all the normal routes and procedures. Are these passengers whose evidence we have taken lying, or are they telling the truth? We have no way to know. We only have such means as are available to us. It is an exercise, this, of the little gray cells.
Well, we shall see. One or more of those passengers killed Ratchet. Which of them? Monsieur Walk and Dr. Constantine tried to see their way through a maze of conflicting particulars to an outstanding solution, as Poirot had instructed them. Monsieur Walk's thoughts ran down a well-worn course that they had already traversed some hundreds of times. Dr. Constantine's thoughts ran along how Poirot could possibly solve the case, but then wandered to thoughts of possibly visiting America and what his wife was doing at the moment. Hercule Poirot sat very still. So still, in fact, one may have thought he was asleep. But then, after a quarter of an hour's complete immobility, his eyebrows began to rise up his forehead, and a small sigh escaped from him. But after all, why not? And if so? Why, if so, that would explain everything. The end. My friends, I have analyzed the evidence in my mind, and I have come to this conclusion. I see nebulously as yet a certain explanation that would account for all the facts as we know them. It is a very curious explanation. In fact, I cannot be sure yet that it is the correct one. Well, what must be done? Assemble all the passengers here. I have more questions for them, and then I will expound on my explanation. All the passengers were ushered into the dining car. There were mixed emotions of apprehension as well as expectancy. Messieurs and Madames, we are here to investigate the death of Samuel Edward Ratchet, alias Cassetti. There are two possible solutions to the crime. I shall put them both before you. The first solution is very simple. Monsieur Ratchet had an enemy whom he feared. This enemy joined the train at Belgrade by the door left open by Monsieur McQueen and Colonel Arbuthnot when they descended to the platform. This assassin was supplied with a wagon-lit uniform and also a conductor's passkey, which he used to enter Monsieur Ratchet's darkened compartment. Monsieur Ratchet was under the influence of a sleeping draught. This assassin stabbed him with great ferocity and then left the compartment by the communication door, leading to Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. That's all. He then proceeded down the corridor until he came to an empty compartment, in which he removed the wagon-lit uniform and stuffed it into a suitcase on the rack. And then, dressed in normal day clothes, he leaves the train just before it leaves Belgrade.
Ah, but no, and again no. That is an explanation that will not hold water. It is deficient in a dozen minor points. Monsieur Poirot must know this perfectly well.
I see I shall have to offer you my second explanation, but do not abandon this one so abruptly. You may agree with it later. You will all recognize that the company assembled on this train is interesting, representing as it does multiple classes and nationalities. I asked myself if it was possible for such a company to be assembled under any other conditions, and the result I got was this. Only in America there might be a household composed of such varied nationalities as are on this train. He then turned to the Count and Countess Andreni. Pardon me, madam. You dropped your handkerchief. That is not my handkerchief, Monsieur Poirot. Not your handkerchief? And yet, madam, it has your initial on it, the initial H. I do not understand, monsieur. My initials are E.A., Elena Andreni. I think not. Your name is Helena, not Elena. Helena Goldenberg, the younger sister of Mrs. Armstrong. That is true, is it not?
I demand, monsieur, by what right have you...
No, Rudolph, let me speak. It is useless to deny what this man says. Your statement is quite true, monsieur. I am Helena Goldenberg, the younger sister of Mrs. Armstrong. I am glad you admit that fact so freely. Will you now tell us your reason for altering your Christian name on your passport with the grease mark? Well, surely, Monsieur Poirot, you can guess my reason, our reason. This man who was killed is the one who murdered my baby niece, who killed my sister, who broke my brother-in-law's heart. 3 of the people who I loved best, who made up my home, my world. Of all the passengers on board the train, I alone had probably the best motive for killing him.
I do not say that I disbelieve. But how then do you explain the presence of your handkerchief actually in the dead man's compartment?
Well, that is not my handkerchief, Monsieur Poirot.
In spite of the initial H?
I believe you have a handkerchief of mine, monsieur.
But Madame la Princess, that's the initial H in the corner. Your Christian name, pardon me, is Natalia?
That is correct, monsieur. My handkerchiefs are always initialed in the Russian characters. H is N in Russian. As for how did my handkerchief come to be lying by the body of the dead man, my reply is that I do not know.
You will pardon me, mademoiselle, but how can we rely on the truthfulness of your replies?
I suppose you mean because I did not tell you that Helena Andreni was Mrs. Armstrong's sister. Her mother was my friend, monsieur. I believe in loyalty to one's friends, to one's family, to one's caste. In that case, I consider that justice, strict justice, has been done.
Well, lies, and again lies. It amazes me the number of lies we have been told this morning.
There are still more to discover. We are now going to tackle the lie Miss Debenham told us.
What?
You, Miss Debenham, were companion governess in the Armstrong household at the time of the kidnapping. You concealed that fact this morning.
Yes, you found me out. How much do you know, Monsieur Poirot, of the fight to keep and gain decent employment? Would any normal, ordinary middle-class woman want to engage a girl who had been detained in connection with a murder as governess to her daughters? I was not going to take that risk when no good end would have been served.
It would have been good of you, mademoiselle, to have helped me in a matter of identification. Is it possible you did not recognize in Helena Andreni, Mrs. Armstrong's younger sister, whom you taught in New York?
No, I know it seems extraordinary to you, but I did not recognize her. She was not fully grown up then. That was over 3 years ago.
There is something else you can tell me, isn't there?
I can't.
It does not matter. I will know soon enough.
Oh, this is more widely improbable than any Roman policia I've ever read.
That is a very profound remark. Would you like to see what Antonio Fascarelli has to say for himself?
Huh? I have nothing more to tell you. Nothing. Do you hear?
Yes, you do. It is likely that I already know. You were the chauffeur for the Armstrong family.
Oh. Well, since you already know, why ask me? You know it was not I. Oh, the little one, Daisy. Antonio, she called me. And she would sit in the car and pretend to hold the wheel. The whole household, they worship her.
I know. The whole household worshipped her, including her nursery maid, Greta Olsen. Now, do not distress yourself, mademoiselle. Do not distress yourself.
It is true. It is true. Oh, she was a sweet little angel. A sweet little trustful angel. She knew nothing but kindness and love. And then she was taken by that wicked man, cruelly treated. And her poor mother, and the other one who never got to live at all. There, I comprehend everything. Everything, I tell you.
I hope I'm not interrupting, sir.
Yes, Monsieur Masterman?
I thought it best to tell you, sir, that I was Colonel Armstrong's batman in the war, and then I was his valet in New York. I had concealed that fact this morning, sir. It was very wrong of me, and I thought it best to make a clean breast of it.
Is that all, Monsieur Masterman?
That is all, sir.
Well, how did you get wind to all this? That's all I want to know.
I just guessed.
Well, believe me, you're a pretty slick guesser. Yes, I'll tell the whole world you're a slick guesser.
Are you sure, Monsieur Hardman, that you are not the gardener or butler of the Armstrong house? No? Ah, maybe a lover of the French girl who threw herself out the window. Yes, that is what I assume for you. And you, Pierre Michel, the French girl's father. Yes, I assume that is appropriate for you. For so many people connected with the Armstrong case to be traveling by the same train through coincidence, it was not only unlikely, it was impossible. It must not be chance, but design. I remember a remark Colonel Arbuthnot made about trial by jury. A jury is composed of 12 people. There are 12 passengers on board this train. Ratchet was stabbed 12 times. This is a self-appointed jury of 12 people who had condemned Ratchet to death. It explains everything. The nature of the wounds, each inflicted by a different person, one of whom was left-handed, and at least 2 who had stabbed Ratchet when he was already dead. Then they decided to confuse the issue even further. They dropped 2 supposed clues. The pipe cleaner, incriminating Colonel Arbuthnot, and the handkerchief, incriminating Princess Dragomarov. I imagine, though I may be wrong, that each person entered Monsieur Ratchet's darkened compartment by the communication door from Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. Now, Mrs. Hubbard, let me say she played the most important part in this drama. By occupying the compartment next door, she was more open to suspicion than anyone else and could not have an alibi to fall back upon. To play the part that she played, the perfectly natural, slightly ridiculous American fond mother, an artist was needed. But, messieurs and madames, there was an artist connected with the Armstrong family. Mrs. Armstrong's mother, Linda Arden, the actress. I always fancied myself in comedy roles. You know everything, Monsieur Poirot? You're a very wonderful man. But even you can't possibly imagine what it was like. That awful day in New York. I was just crazy with grief. So were the servants. Colonel Arbuthnot was there too. He was John Armstrong's best friend.
He saved my life in the war.
We decided then and there that the sentence of death Cassetti had escaped had got to be carried out. Mary worked out all the details, later with Hector McQueen. It took a long time to perfect our plan. Hardman managed to track down Ratchet, and then we got both Hector and Masterman into his employment. We learned from Hector that Ratchet would be coming back from the east sooner or later by means of the Orient Express. With Pierre Michel actually working on that train, the chance was too good to be missed. Well, now you know everything, Monsieur Poirot. What are you going to do about it? If it must all come out, can't you lay the blame upon me, and me only? I would have stabbed that man 12 times willingly. It wasn't just because he was responsible for my daughter's death and my daughter's daughters. and that of the other one who might have been alive and happy now. It was more than that. There were other children before Daisy, and there would be others in the future. Society had condemned him. We were only carrying out the sentence. But it is unnecessary to bring all these others into it, all these good, faithful souls. You are the director of the company, Monsieur Bock. What do you say? Well, in my opinion, Monsieur Poirot, the first theory you put forward of the assassin who joined the train at Belgrade was the correct one. Decidedly so. I suggest that is the solution we offer the Yugoslavian police when they arrive. You agree, Doctor?
Certainly I agree. As regards the medical evidence, I may have made one or two slightly fantastical suggestions.
Then, having placed my solution before you, I have the honor to retire from the case.